The pressure on Iran has reached a new level. This Wednesday, April 15, 2026, what we see in the Gulf is not just another military crisis. It's the formation of a siege that combines a naval blockade, an armed alliance, and energy routes outside of Hormuz. Tehran is starting to lose its ability to block the region through the strait and is now facing simultaneous pressure by sea, air, and economically. The most urgent fact is clear. The United States has confirmed the full implementation of the blockade on Iranian ports after the failure of the ceasefire talks. This gained momentum between April 13th, 14th, and 15th. And where this explodes is in the most sensitive corridor on the planet for global energy. But the shock is not only at sea. The other front comes from the rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. Reuters reported that the two signed a formal defense pact in September 2025. And now, on April 11, Pakistan sent fighter jets and support aircraft to King Abdulaziz Air Base in eastern Saudi Arabia, very close to the Gulf. This carries a lot of weight because the same Pakistan that tries to mediate talks is also, in practice, strengthening the side that wants to contain Tehran. It's a tough, cold, and symbolic move. While diplomacy talks about a truce, the military presence increases at Iran's doorstep. This step answers a destructive question. How is Tehran being surrounded by the combination of military force and regional repositioning? Saudi Arabia gets extra backing, Pakistan moves closer to the Gulf chessboard, and the United States remains at the center of the pressure. On the same day, the 15th Reuters also showed that Riyadh released another $3 billion in support to Pakistan, strengthening a bond that is no longer just diplomatic. Does that help explain it? Why doesn't the siege seem improvised? It has a political base, a financial base, and now it has an operational base. But the quietest blow is in the energy sector. Saudi Arabia restored the full capacity of the East-West pipeline to 7 million barrels per day on April 12th. After attacks linked to the war with Iran, this pipeline carries oil from the Gulf side to Yanbu on the Red Sea without depending on Hormuz. This changes the game, because the strait remains vital, but it is no longer the only bottleneck for the important part of Saudi production. In other words, when Riyadh reopens this artery, it reduces the weight of the Iranian threat on the oil flow. The numbers explain why this scares Tehran. The US Energy Information Administration says that Saudi Arabia has a pipeline with a capacity of 5 million barrels per day, with a temporary expansion to 7 million, and that the United Arab Emirates operates another corridor with 1.8 million barrels per day to Fujairah on the Gulf of Oman. It doesn't solve everything, but it greatly weakens the old Iranian weapon of turning Hormuz into a global panic button. The market has already understood this message. South Korea announced this Wednesday that it has secured 273 million barrels of crude oil and 2.1 billion tons of naphtha through alternative routes outside of Hormuz. Of this total, Saudi Arabia promised to send 50 million barrels between April and May through Red Sea ports, in addition to prioritizing another 200 million by the end of the year. This shows the reason for the change. Major buyers are rushing away from the choke point. When consumers look for alternative routes, the pressure on Tehran is not just military, but also a loss of economic influence. That's why what's happening is not a classic invasion, but rather a gradual squeeze. Those surrounding Tehran are regional rivals, external allies, and the energy market all acting at the same time. When that happens, the Iranian regime loses room to intimidate and also loses time to negotiate from a comfortable position. The strait remains crucial, but dependence on Hormuz is no longer absolute for everyone, and that's exactly where the disruption lies. Iran's most powerful card starts to lose its value. Even so, it would be a mistake to consider this situation resolved. The Associated Press reported that the truce remains fragile and that the current ceasefire lasts until April 22. Reuters also showed that oil remains sensitive and that any new attack could reignite turmoil in the markets. So, the final picture is this. Tehran is under pressure because it faces a blockade, sees its rivals opening routes to bypass Hormuz, and is witnessing a military rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. and it faces buyers trying to reduce its ability to exert pressure. The pressure is mounting now. And the reason is simple. When the alternative route appears and the armed alliance grows, Iran's power to threaten shrinks.